The Colts returned to practice on Sunday, but the offense's performance was not at their Sunday best. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is up, Colts fans? Thanks so much for tuning in and making us your number one listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, everyone, I'm Jake Arthur, joined as always by my guy Zach Hicks here on your screen. And we got a special guest today. This is our guy, Andrew Moore. You know, Andrew is one of the hosts of a Colts podcast, as well as all of his written work over with Zach and me over at horseshoehuddle.com. Today, we're just going to kind of pick Andrew's brain about his thoughts about camp so far, and we'll also just kind of chat with him a little bit about today's practice Sunday. So, Andrew, how are we doing today, brother?
It's a hot one. That's for sure.
It really is. We might regret doing this outside, but we wanted it to be pretty, so I don't know. So we are 7 practices in now. We'll get to it in a bit, but today was definitely the clunkiest of them. What's your main takeaway so far through these 7 practices and 2 weeks of camp?
There's a couple different things. I think starting out, the feel of camp this year is just different. We're not constantly worried about the quarterback situation. Yeah. We know it's going to be Matt Ryan that's leading the show, and he's really done a great job of that. The tempo has been very quick in practice, consistently getting done 10 to 20 minutes early sometimes. So outside of today, the practices have been crisp. You've seen some guys that have shown out, some guys that have taken the next step. Like Michael Pittman. I think Pittman has really impressed. And then some additions that have stood out. Yannick Ngakoue is one, but I really think Stephon Gilmore has been probably the defensive MVP of training camp so far. So some good signs there. Obviously, today wasn't the Colts' best day, but I think overall the Colts are pretty happy with where they're at this point.
I think you're right. Just from being here and seeing especially the quarterback play the last few years, it's a new quarterback every year. You guys are going to hear some roosters and some nonsense like that in the background, so just bear with us. No, it used to be Andrew Luck every year. Then it's a new quarterback. Last year it was 2 backups with Carson Wentz out. It was Jacob Eason and Sam Ehlinger kind of running the show. So for it to be a competent, established veteran like Matt Ryan, who knows how he likes things and knows how things should be done, that's definitely been refreshing, I would say.
Yeah, no, and I wanted to ask Andrew because I saw him kind of talking about it there on Twitter, and I think he put it in his post-training camp thing today article about Matt Ryan kind of holding guys accountable and kind of being, I think someone put it on Twitter, and I saw it kind of going around, was like, I love that my quarterback is a jerk, and it's kind of like that. Now, I'm not saying he's been a jerk or anything like that, but Andrew, what did you see out there from Matt Ryan for, what you kind of said was like a sloppy day? What did you see from him trying to get these guys back on track?
Yeah, so during practice, Matt Ryan is consistently on these guys. He's making sure they're getting set up properly. In between reps, he's talking individually with wide receivers. Saw him multiple times talking to like Alec Pierce, telling him how he wants a route run, where exactly he needs to be when the ball's thrown. Because Matt Ryan is a timing-based quarterback, and that's a timing-based offense that Frank Reich has. So just working with those guys, getting the timing down, and he's going the extra mile to sit with these young guys and really explain what he wants. But then after practice, on a day where the Colts offense was very sloppy, you think, oh, Matt Ryan's going to come in here and speak to the media, and he might not be too happy. Instead, he kind of displayed that leadership ability that we've been hearing so much about all offseason, where he said mistakes happen. Physical mistakes happen, but the thing that they need to focus on is the mental mistakes, the things that they can control. And I think, every single person, when we've asked them what stands out about Matt Ryan, first thing they say is his leadership. And that was on full display today as well.
Awesome. It's good to see because, again, with Carson Wentz being out for all of camp last year, we kind of missed a lot of that. And then obviously the years before that was so much instability at quarterback. It's kind of tough to see. Then the other thing I wanted to ask kind of both you guys here is, there's so much of a big emphasis on this new defensive staff, Gus Bradley, these new coaches, and just from you guys watching, how has this like new defensive staff been compared to maybe the defensive regime the last one or whatever? Because you guys have been to camps for the last couple of years now. I think you were out there last year a little bit too, right, Andrew? So
yeah,
how is this staff kind of different, I guess, from the last staff, just from what you guys are seeing at camp?
Yeah, let's take that away.
I think they're just, it seems like they're more involved, they're more hands-on. I mean, you go out there and you see Nick Cross make a play. Who's the first guy to congratulate him? Mike Mitchell, the assistant defensive back coach. It seems like it's a more aggressive scheme. You see the cornerbacks in press coverage a lot more because in Matt Eberflus's scheme, you hardly saw any press coverage. Guys were starting 5 to 10 yards off the receiver on every single play. But you see guys like Stephon Gilmore, Brandon Facing, Kenny Moore II getting up in the wide receiver's face, making it difficult for them from the jump. And then when you go closer to the line of scrimmage with this defensive line, Nate Ollie has done a really good job of instilling that attacking mentality. There's no more reading blocks. As soon as the ball's snapped, they're pinning their ears back and they're going to get the quarterback. And that's why I think we've seen a guy like Yannick Ngakoue flash in camp. And it's not necessarily that Matt Pryor's doing a poor job of blocking him. I think Matt Pryor's actually holding up pretty well. But they're putting Gus Bradley and his staff are putting the Colts defenders in the right spot based on their skill set for them to succeed. And I think that's why you're seeing a more aggressive defense. You're seeing the defense get the best out of the offense, especially here early. Now, I think things will kind of even out as we go in camp, but it's definitely a good sign here that these players are taking well to this new scheme.
Yeah, and I was going to say something pretty similar, especially with that first part. We're used to the players. The defensive players are always louder. It's a competitive setting, of course. The players love to chirp, but you're hearing a lot more from from the coaches as well. At every level, you've got these young guys. Nate Ollie on the defensive line, first-year D-line coach in his 30s. Cato June is one of the assistant coaches with the linebackers. Mike Mitchell is very visible all the time. He's a big confidence boost for these young players, and everything we heard about him during his time as a player with the Colts, that brief time, you can see it now as a coach out on the field. So that's definitely refreshing. I think that's a good pick-me-up for players. I haven't really noticed any of these defensive players slogging through. Like, they always seem to have a pep in their step. It's really lively on that side of the ball. And then I would also, schematically, the press stuff is really great to see. I'm getting the impression, just from what I've seen in practice, of course, as much as you can see from the pass rush, I just have a much better feeling about it this time around. And that's not just because Yannick Ngakoue is here, but I just feel like the pass rushers seem to be more disruptive outside of just like DeForest Buckner now. I've seen some really good blitzes that seem to have worked coming off, the nickel packages, corner blitzes, things like that. The blitzes seem to be pretty successful. So I'm looking forward to the pass rush as well moving forward there.
Yeah. Not to pump an article that I'll probably have out in the next day or two, but Gus Bradley, for someone who doesn't blitz very often, when he does blitz, he usually gets home. Like the blitzes are usually pretty effective. So I'll go into detail with that, but that's awesome to see even in camp. And then obviously, again, something I like to keep asking about, because I just had an article go out on it today, are the linebackers, and I know that we don't want to go too much into it because we're going to talk about the defense in a couple segments from now and stuff like that. But how do the linebackers look in this scheme? I mean, from what you saw, Andrew, I don't know if you're watching linebackers or anything like that, but how are they looking out there in this type of scheme?
I think they're continuing to fly around the ball. I mean, we see Bobby Okereke and Zaire Franklin. They were both in on multiple plays today. They were in there stopping Jonathan Taylor for no gain, stopping Nyheim Hines. And those two, when the pads are on, they're not afraid to lay a lick on their teammates. They make sure to lay a thump. So even without Shaquille Leonard, who, in my opinion, is probably the heart and soul of this defense, he's not in there. the linebackers are still able to make plays. I mean, we saw Bobby Okereke flash last year in training camp as well.
Right.
And then when you get to the regular season, yeah, he led the team in tackles, but the flash plays weren't there.
Right.
I think we're starting to see him use that speed to his advantage because, I mean, even coming out of Stanford, he was known for flying all over the field. And we're starting to see that more just because of the freedom that the linebackers have, it seems like, in this scheme.
Yeah, these linebackers aren't afraid to thump their teammates. But you know what, guys? Sometimes life thumps you. Level with me. We've all been in a situation at some point in our lives when we're a little tight on cash. Maybe you can only afford to put a few gallons of gas in your car, or you've got another save the date that just came in, and you're wondering how you're going to get these people a gift. That's where Dave can help. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy that wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need a little extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. So looking at the offensive side of the ball again, you know, this was a really clunky, sloppy practice in general, but it was mostly from the offense. And the defense they were opportunistic based on that, and they made plays off of it. But, you know, something we've seen throughout camp is just guys slipping, like receivers slipping, coming out of their cuts. Today there was, I think, Nyheim Hines fumbled without even being hit. There was a bunch of drops throughout the 7-on-7s and the 11s. There was close to 10 drops probably in that. But it just, I don't know. It was just a lot of mental mistakes, and it's been very uncharacteristic for this group coming out of camp. They've been pretty sharp, especially with Matt Ryan under center. But yeah, really uncharacteristic. I would imagine some of these meetings today might get a little loud.
Yeah.
And then when they hit the field again on Monday, I've got to think some of these things will get corrected. But unfortunately, some of these guys that have made a habit out of drops, it continued. You know, Kylan Granson had one. He had a couple of his better catches today, but he, had another drop. Alec Pierce didn't have the strongest day. Some of the running backs were dropping balls. So not the greatest showing from the offense. We kind of have to contextualize that leading into talking about today's practice.
So how did you guys break it down on how you watched? Did you guys watch different groups on offense, or how did you guys watch today?
Mainly when we watched different things, the Colts have kind of structured things a little differently now. When the offensive and defensive linemen go do one-on-ones, there's 7-on-7s going on the other field. So I went and watched the offensive and defensive linemen, and Andrew watched the 7-on-7s there. He also watched the one-on-ones between receivers and tight ends and defensive backs.
Okay. So we'll start with Andrew then, talking about the pass catchers. Outside of the drops, who were some guys that stood out? I saw that there was a big Ashton Dulin catch. I saw that. You know, you guys know that my eyes were perking up when I saw that.
Yeah. There was. It was a beautiful play. I mean, Ashton Dulin is continuing to stack days, and I don't think there's any question he's wide receiver 4 at this point. And until Pierce gets comfortable with the NFL game, he could battle Pierce for wide receiver 3. I know they're throwing as much as they can at Alec Pierce. I think he's doing a pretty good job of really trying to master it and then going through the steps. I mean, yeah, he's a rookie. He's going to have mistakes, but for the most part, he looks like he belongs. But yeah, Ashton Dulin was on the left side being covered by Chris Wilcox, did a double move, good pump fake by Nick Foles. And then, Ashton Dulin turns on the burners, goes 65 yards. Foles put it right in the breadbasket for a touchdown. It was a great play by Ashton Dulin. And then in one-on-ones, I think the guys that really stood out was Paris Campbell again. Paris Campbell made a very nice catch down the sideline. And then Desmond Patman, he also hauled in a nice over-the-shoulder grab in one-on-one. So of the wide receivers, those were the ones that stood out. And I think for Desmond Patman especially, we need to start seeing more from him because this is year 3, and it's we can't keep waiting. Chris Ballard and Frank Reich are not going to keep waiting. It's now his time to shine and try to carve out a role on this offense. Otherwise, here in a year or two, he might not be a member of this roster.
Heck, I honestly think if you would have Jake and I do our 53-man projections right now, we'd probably lean someone else at wide receiver 5.
I did an update on Friday and I gave it to QT. I only kept 5 receivers and I made QT the final one.
I think that's where I'd probably go too. But Andrew, you were also watching tight ends today as well? I
was watching tight ends.
All right, so tight ends, I saw it again. I keep seeing his name, Drew Ogletree, tight end 2. I know that was our thumbnail for our last video. So, we have to push this. But, I mean, I don't want to say it's his job because he obviously has a long uphill climb to take it from those 2 guys. Even if he's perfect in camp and those guys are struggling, they will still always have that inside edge. But from what you're seeing, I mean, is Drew Ogletree kind of taking that job?
Drew Ogletree is consistently just doing his job. I mean, he goes out there, he doesn't make the mental errors. Anytime he's throwing the ball, you don't see Drew Ogletree dropping it. He's out there, even in the running game. I watched him a couple times today, and he's holding his own on blocks, which a guy that was a converted wide receiver, you might think that's probably one of his weak points. But he's out there, he's doing the work. You can see why this Colts staff is high on Drew Ogletree, because he's proving it day in and day out. I mean, when I was here for the first week of camp, Jelani Woods looked good. I loved the way that he moved down the field. But now I don't think it's a contest. I think Drew Ogletree is tight end 3 as of right now. And if Granson keeps having days where he has numerous drops and he's not functioning or really putting it on tape, Drew Ogletree could take that tight end 2 role and be that F tight end, because, I mean, former wide receiver, the guy can move. He's a mismatch down the field. I mean, the pace that he is on, I would say that it's wide open for tight end 2 with Drew Ogletree and Kylan Granson at this point.
Honestly, I think the only reason there's even question about the tight end depth chart right now is because of the status of certain guys.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it just based off performance, it would be Mo Alley-Cox and Drew Ogletree 1 and 2, no question. But you have to you have to have a disclaimer for Kylan Granson, it being his second year, so he knows the system a little better. And then Woods, he's the physical freak with all the high potential in the 3rd round pick. But if you're going just based on performance, the top 2 is clear.
Yeah.
But we really don't know what that depth chart will look like once they release it.
Yeah, they will probably release it later this week here before, at least the unofficial one prior to the first preseason game there. But Jake, you had the unflashy job today. You were watching a bunch of O-line and D-line. Which offensive lineman stood out today?
Offensive lineman. So Matt Pryor stonewalled Yannick Ngakoue twice. They went off. It was a shorter period of one-on-ones today, so they went against each other twice. Pryor won both of them. Now our guy Ifeadi Odenigbo got him later in the series, but Pryor looked really good today. Let's see, Braden Smith not so much. Kwity Paye got him a couple times. Honestly, it was a defensive day for that drill. Kwity Paye got Braden Smith twice on the same thing. Went through just the outside underneath dip, got him both times. Odenigbo got the really good one. Dayo Odenigbo, the violence he plays with is just it's you can tell that he's been training all off season. He's starting to look very technical. He does so much with his hands. But no, I've definitely got to give that series to the defenders. It's not going to be as kind to talk about the offensive guys today.
Yeah. So let's start doing that transition now, because Jake obviously just completely disregarded the O-line, try to jump to defense here.
I had to.
Yeah, Jake gets a little excitable. And, for people who get a little excitable, I have something great for you guys. Right now, if you are a big betting nerd, you can bet on the Colts' first preseason game. Yeah. You can bet on a preseason game, guys. The Bills are currently favored by 3.5 points on Bet Online. So you guys can go on Bet Online today and pick your Colts. If you think that Nick Foles is going to lead the Colts to a preseason victory, go to Bet Online. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting to scores to podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jake, since you already wanted to talk about the defensive linemen, since you had to jump the gun.
I totally ruined your portion of the segment.
You ruined all of it. No, so you mentioned Dio, you mentioned Quiddy, you mentioned Yannick. You kind of mentioned all of them, but what are some other news and notes we got here from this defensive line from what you saw?
Just from the defensive line, that was about it generally. But during the actual 11 on 11s, so Odenigbo, this was the third straight day with a sack. You and I talked last week that he just hadn't been catching up to Ben Banigou as much. And I think all he needed was for me to say that, because ever since then, he's just been racking up the sacks. Dio had a really busy day in the 11 on 11s. Him and Nick Cross came down in conversion. I think it was Philip Lindsay for a tackle for loss. And then I had Quiddy, or not Quiddy, but Dio with another sack later on, I think. So really good day from them. There was a scare there for me.
I heard, dude, my heart.
Yeah, Curtis Brooks went down and he left with trainers off to the sideline for a little bit. We had no idea what it was at the time because he wasn't really limping or anything. But Frank Reich after practice said that he got poked in the eye. So as long as there was no damage to it, I think he's going to be fine. So that's definitely good, because that would have ended the show for good right there. We would have had to sign off for the final time.
Us banking our show on a 6th-round rookie is a little risky, but it's fine. It's fine.
And then the last defensive lineman that really jumped out to me is another guy who I didn't write anything about it, but I made a mental note, was Eric Johnson. He's explosive.
Got a great first step.
Yeah, really good first step. Gets off the ball quickly. He's very twitchy. And there was one of the one-on-one reps where he just came in and he had the offensive lineman, I can't recall who, I want to say it was Wesley French, just had him up on his tiptoes. It was a beautiful rep by Johnson. And he started out a little slow to camp, but he's catching on quick, and I really like where he's at right now.
Awesome. That D-line depth is going to be so good to see.
It's one of the hardest position groups to whittle down when you're making roster predictions, for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you keep 4? Do you keep 5? Do you keep the young kids? Do you keep the older guys? Like exactly. That's going to be a tough one there. But when it came to linebackers, we already kind of talked to them in the beginning, but I think, Andrew, you're watching some linebackers today. Which were you mentioned the top guys. Who were some of the bottom guys that stood out? I think I saw more Doman love again today on the timeline.
Yeah, always. We're gonna have some more right here. Jojo Doman was in there at Mike linebacker with EJ Speed, a guy that has been in this system this was his 4th season now. Or 4th season on the team, I should say. But Doman was the one that was calling the plays. Undrafted rookie who's out there getting the defense set up for that second team. Very impressive out there. I think he, above the starters like Okereke and Franklin, he's the one that has really stood out to me. And I would say he had probably, out of all the undrafted guys, has the best chance to make this 53-man roster outright. And I think I'm very excited to see what he does in live action in these preseason games, because I think when things are live and he's able to kind of unleash himself a little bit, he's going to be making play after play in the middle of that defense.
Awesome. And then jumping to corners, I saw a lot of great things about Stephon Gilmore, but before we get to him and the rest of the cornerback group, Isaiah Rodgers had a pick in one-for-ones or one-on-ones, which I saw what everyone was going crazy about. Now I'm assuming Colts social media will probably post that later, because they usually post the things that people go crazy about. But what about Isaiah Rodgers? How did he look today?
He looked good. That interception was he twisted in midair to bring it down. Definitely made the crowd here at Westfield go wild for a little bit. But this outside cornerback battle with Faison and Isaiah Rodgers is very interesting, because Faison continues to run with the starting offense or defense, excuse me. And he's holding his own. He's not the most flashy guy, but it seems like he's always in the right position. He doesn't make those errors that he has to kind of catch himself up on. Isaiah Rodgers has been making more plays, I would say, with the second team, the interceptions, the pass breakups. but it seems like he's the one that's also making a little bit more of the mental mistakes and kind of has to use that raw speed that he has to kind of catch back up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, what would you like to see out of that cornerback position? A guy that's always going to be in the right spot, a bigger guy in facing, or a guy that's a little bit smaller and might make some more mistakes because he's still getting used to that position? But it seems like he's a better playmaker in Isaiah Rodgers. So I don't think that battle is going to end anytime soon, and I think it's going to continue all the way up until that final preseason game, and then probably into the season.
Yeah, that one is really interesting because Faison hasn't really done anything to lose this spot, but Rodgers just keeps making plays. And that play, it was just such a typical Isaiah Rodgers play. Really athletic, had to contort himself and kind of dive for it. It is very on brand for him. But no, it's I don't know if he just keeps the same role and they try and find more ways to get him on the defense. But yeah, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Now let's throw some praise to Stephon Gilmore, because that was the biggest talk. I mean, you guys were right there all day. I saw, I think Zach Kiefer or someone said that like he was the best player on the field today. I know he had a pick or whatever. So what did you guys see from Stephon Gilmore today?
Yeah, so to start it out for him, it was 7-on-7s, and it was probably Matt Ryan's like third throw maybe. He threw just a shallow kind of out route on the right side to Paris Campbell. Gilmore flew up and just jumped the route and picked it, and they were deep in their own territory, so it would have been a pick six in a real game. And then later on, after Nyheim Hines, after he fumbled, it was Gilmore there to pick it up and keep running with it. So, aside from that, he showed his normal amount of physicality, not giving anybody an inch, making life difficult. Even in one-on-ones, he doesn't let anyone have a freebie. So what did you think from Gilmore today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's same thing he's been doing since camp started. He goes out there. He's a very quiet individual. You don't see him really harping it or being that loud vocal leader that Darius Leonard is, or Shaquille Leonard. But he goes out there, he does his job, he does it incredibly well, and he leads by example. I mean, he started out one-on-ones. It was Michael Pittman Jr. versus Stephon Gilmore, and Gilmore had blanket coverage on him and just swiped the ball away. And throughout, he's one of those guys that doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Even when he does make a mistake, you don't see him act out of frustration because he's a vet. He's been here, done that for a long, long time. And I think that's great for a lot of these young cornerbacks, these young even safeties, these young defensive backs on this team, to kind of take after a guy that's played at such a high level for so long. And I mean, if Keeper said he was the best player on the field today, I would agree, because he showed out, and I don't think there was anybody on Gilmore's level today at Grant Park.
Yeah, so someone in the media room afterward asked, what went wrong in Carolina for him not to come back, and it's because he just looks that good. And not that Carolina wouldn't want him back, but shoot, without declaring him the defensive player of the year that he once was, he looks a lot like New England Gilmore out here.
Yeah, no, he is an outstanding talent, and he looked good last year too. We said that a lot on this podcast, but I mean, before we jump off today, do you guys have anything more to add from camp that you guys saw?
Nah, I don't have any more nice things to say. I'll leave it to Andrew if he's got anything to sign off.
It's going to be interesting to see how this offense bounces back, because, I mean, last week, out of 2 out of 3 practices, the defense dominated. Defense was on top again today. I know the defense is usually ahead to start camp, but as an offense and from what Frank Reich wants to see, he probably doesn't want to see this continue too much longer. He wants the offense to start having good days as well, to kind of get their confidence boosted as we head in towards week 1. So that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for throughout the rest of the week, and see how this offense bounces back, how Matt Ryan and Frank Reich rally the troops, and see if they can respond to a defense that's been pretty stifling so far here in camp.
Awesome.
Yep. And thanks again, Andrew, for hopping on with us today.
Absolutely.
Guys, yeah, it won't be the last time that he's here with us. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Andrew Moore NFL. Subscribe to a Colts podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you're listening right now. YouTube as well. They're on there. And where can they? Is it a Colts podcast on Twitter? Okay,
at a Colts podcast on all social and on YouTube.
Yep. Absolutely. So whatever you're doing with us, just do the same with a Colts podcast and Andrew.
Yeah, and like Jake mentioned, make sure you guys are following us as well. I need to jump in there and shout out us as well. I'm the narcissistic one here now, but at Jake Arthur NFL, follow him on Twitter along with Andrew. Like Jake just said, put your tweet notifications on for both guys. I know today that I put notifications on for both of them out there just so I could be up to date with everything going on. Follow me on Twitter at ZachHicks2. Follow all three of our works there on horseshoehuddle.com. You're going to see a lot of written work on camp from those two guys, and then some nerdy film stuff from me. So whichever is your flavor, in the off season. And then like Jake just said, wherever you're listening to our podcast, just continue to do that. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever. Keep that subscribe going. Keep hitting those reviews, rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff, guys. So we appreciate it. We appreciate it. Make sure, again, go listen to Andrew's stuff. He's awesome. Honestly, I would let him just take over, my speaking job on here if I weren't paid so well. So, I mean, that's what we got. But no, we do appreciate you coming on, Andrew, and it's always been a blast talking to you.
Thanks again, guys, for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now make Locked On Fantasy Football your second listen. Find the intellectual fantasy expert Vinny Iyer, who brings over 20 years of NFL expertise and a unique angle to give you the moves no one else has. Get ready for your fantasy draft with Locked On Fantasy Football. We'll see you guys tomorrow.